While the goons are great and the generals are good, today we're covering the big bosses of the LEGO Ninjago line. I've selected 10 big baddies that I think count as the series' best, in terms of physical appearance, and with a slight bit of aid from their show counterparts. There are many characters that might fit on a list like this, so to keep things fair, I'm not covering any generals in this video, just the villainous villains that vilely villainize the world. I'm going to judge their villainosity based on their show actions this time. For example, Scale started the series out as a minion, or a second-hand man, but managed to connive his way into a leadership spot. Then he got the Fangpire to follow his lead, and it wasn't until Pythor showed up that he voluntarily stepped back into a secondary role. One that didn't last long, as after Pythor was devoured by the Great Devourer, Scales was crowned King of the Serpentine. Therefore, Scales is in the running for this list, but, for example, Acidicus is not. Get it? Got it? Great. Slap that like button, subscribe if you enjoy, and let's go!
Number 10.
Spinning his way into the last place on this list, though not the lowest of all rankings, arrives our first character. On my last list, I placed the regular Oni Warrior rather high up. My bias shines through here once more, I fear, because in all honesty, the Omega is kind of flat, both in terms of character and design. As the supposed biggest possible bad, at least at the time of 2019 Ninjago canon, the Omega was meant to be the most powerful expression of the darkness of Oni, and of destruction itself possible to find in any of the realms. Which is why, of course, they spent the whole time bumbling about in a cloud, and then just got one-shot by a tornado specifically intended to only create. Just like how the whole creation thing failed to give him any arm or leg printing. He's just a bit disappointing. The only saving grace that this figure possesses is the head and mask face printing and pieces respectively, which is what places him above the figures not listed here. I'm a real big fan of the idea behind these Oni, and that wins him so many brownie points in my book, but he is firmly at the bottom of this list.
Number 9.
He's lean, he's mean, and he ain't one you can redeem. As the main antagonist of the first realm section of the Hunted season and wave of Ninjago, the Iron Baron was a highly memorable inclusion into the series. He represented a kind of evil that the ninja hadn't really had to deal with prior to that point. Not so much a force of nature bent on destruction, or an evil individual that enjoyed the chaos of it all, but rather a dark personality with a whole host of character flaws and insecurities wrapped up in a neat little bow that was his complete lack of ethics and morals. He held on to his control over the Dragon Hunters through deceit, fear-mongering and lies, but also manipulated them into thinking patterns that would best serve his own continued control. If it wasn't for his hubris leading to this apparently not fatal engagement with the Firstborn, then it may have been outright impossible to dislodge him from power. He also has a distinct design, featuring a humorous top hat, an interesting claw arm attachment, a peg leg, and one of the Dragon Hunter chest pieces turned backwards to allow him to holster a knife. He gives off certain vibes. Not quite sure what that might be in reference to.
Number 8.
And who is behind door number 8? Nadakhan, the last surviving Jinn. Nadakhan has become an increasingly controversial character over the years, his main plotline in Skybound being that of an odd marriage intent between him and Nia, who was later stated to be a younger teenager. That aside, as a villain he was incredibly imposing. He had the power, he had the motivation, and at least for a time, he also had a bit of the depth. Nadakhan was initially written to possess motivations based more around righteous indignation at the death of his entire world at the hands of the ninjas' callous disregard for the consequences of their actions. Then the aforementioned marriage plotline kicked in and he went full megalomaniac, as apparently marriage equals unrestricted reality warping for Jin. Not sure what they were going with there. From then on, the season lost its plot pretty quickly. His minifigure itself, though, does not. With that marvellous orange and green colour scheme, the top ponytail hair and the wispy ghost bottom piece with translucent red and a bit of orange, all done over in a piratey manner with that hook hand and the Jolly Roger on his chest, Nadakhan looks great. No complaints there.
Number 7.
To anyone that might have been watching this channel for a while, this placement might come as a bit of a shock to you. Indeed, I couldn't seem to find it in myself to place Lord Garmadon any higher than the number 7 spot. This is specifically his 2018 variant, as I think that's the best looking minifigure of the lot, especially when nostalgia for 2011 Garmadon isn't my primary decision making factor. There is far too much to say on the matter of Lord Garmadon for this small segment, especially when it comes to his show self's existence, and thus I had to distance myself from it entirely. Thus I was judging this based entirely on his minifigure here and not anything else. And I have to say, I really like it. The reused movie movie Garmadon helmet is distinct and interesting. The face printing looks solid and imposing, and of course his signature forearms give a distinct look to his silhouette. I especially enjoy the printing on it. The purple dripping down reminds you that this is just after his resurrection, and the remaining ribs on his under torso and the follow down printing travels to his belt are big pluses. I do wish they were purple rather than blue, however.
Number 6.
Now, who could come in after that and beat out Garmadon? Purple Pythor is the one I've selected to take the top spot on this occasion when it comes to Pythor, specifically the Pythor from 2019's Legacy Wave, which was a remake of his 2012 self, that purple Pythor. Now, I'll be honest, it's not my favourite variant of his in terms of aesthetics, that goes to 2016's Day of the Departed Pythor with the robe, but it is the most modern and up-to-date purple Pythor which reflects upon his time in the show, and the stage on which I believe he had his greatest villainous existence. Pythor was an incredibly memorable character in Season 1 and more than succeeded in carrying the mantle of primary antagonist. His hubris led to his downfall in such a picture-perfect manner, didn't it? He had such a distinct and unique character design as well. All of the Serpentine did, but Pythor was the most distinct of them all. Literally, he is unique amongst Anacondrae as far as we can tell, in a number of ways.
Number 5.
Master Chen is iconic. I don't care what anyone else has to say. Chen is one of those characters that has lodged himself deeply inside my brain and will never ever leave. I'm fully aware that from an outside perspective looking in, the hype for Chen might not be understandable, but I'm sure most Ninjago fans can at least attest that Chen had the charisma, the personality, and the impact to make a relatively quick but unforgettable mark on Ninjago's story. Released for the first wave of 2015, the first time Ninjago would release 2 seasons of the show a year, and thus 2 separate toy waves. Master Chen came with this massive headdress that was partially made of a softer plastic, the likes of which you can find on Pythor's tail. He had a cape in Enter the Serpent, but lacked one in his other 2015 appearance, and his later 2016 one. I think the snake skull headdress more than makes up for his lack of arm printing, and the simple yet elegant robe design of his torso and legs carried through the rest of the figure in terms of quality. He's very distinct in a very good way. He's also just a rather entertaining villain.
Number 4.
And now who do we have here? Lord Raz, a character that has mainlined the villain mainstay mainly for 2 solid years running. And although now with the brand new wave that just came out, it seems that he's shifting away from the life of villainy, he certainly made more than enough of an impact to count on this list. Now, I've got a slight confession to make. I haven't seen Dragon's Rising yet, and that means that I have no idea what he's actually like in the show, and thus he got to number 4 solely due to his merit as a minifigure. The Chima-oriented aesthetic, the Gordon pauldrons of his 2023 figure, and the wonderful and exciting arm printing all contribute to this figure's placement here on the list. It was a hard choice between his 3 variants, but in the end this one spoke to me the most. I appreciate the gold, the red, and the black colour scheme, and the pink pattern on his head pops in contrast with the black. His eyes are also really well done, they practically gleam out of their sockets. It's a very imposing look, and one that I think more than earns him this high a spot on the list.
Number 3.
Revenge. Revenge. Revenge! I'll put my hands up and admit it, I really like Asph. She was a comedic overture that legitimately worked in the context of the post-Oni Ninjago, and was actually a really great follow-up to them, as it set the stakes a heck of a lot lower than they had just been, but also didn't completely invalidate her threat level. Memes aside, she gave us a great insight into Ninjago's more ancient history, a time period that had almost nothing revealed about it up until that point. The show not even being consistent with the ages of the incredibly old, but maybe not quite as old as we thought, Wu. The minifigure was also spot on, featuring a wispy ghost tailpiece with a translucent orange light in the Nadakhans, and a bit of extra material to create an awesome fire-like effect. I really like this, and although she appears in the show with a tail, I don't actually have an issue with her using this piece again, though honestly it's her torso upwards that wins her the design award in my eyes. The pearlescent gold mixed with the whites and oranges on her torso are great, but the armour is where it really shines through. It's perfectly moulded to a Pyro Destroyer style head, and has these wonderful little snakes moulded on each of the pauldrons. It's all done in the same gold that her head is, which still possesses the same brilliant light feature as before, and there's even a stud on the back for her to store her scroll of forbidden spinjitzu. She's a really fun character and an even more fun figure all around.
Number 2.
Speaking of a great figure all around, this was another tough one, though for a different reason than before. Morro is our number 2 runner-up today, but you might be asking yourself immediately, which Morro am I talking about? His ghostly form from 2015, the possessed Lloyd body from the same year, or perhaps this new 2025 Morro figure? Gosh, it's almost been a decade. I've put the 2015 ghost figure here at the top, but let me tell you that it wasn't an easy decision. Morro was a surefire top 3 pick for me, because he was hands down the best written character throughout the first section of Ninjago. Without question. Unlike Karumi, Morro stuck that landing on his arc and was kept in character the whole way through. He'd be number 1 if this was me listing solely on character writing merits, but even though though I think there's a better villain minifigure out there, Morro's ghost design is still really cool. It's got a translucent head and legs, both with printing on them that perfectly encapsulate his nature as an incorporeal spirit. My favourite detail is the ninja-esque suit printing on his torso though. This reflects his envy-wrought backstory and practically forces him to never forget what caused him to become this trapped ghost in the first place. What a haunting reminder. His cape is another big draw, as it's all ragged and filled with holes. That's not the termites getting into my Lego, by the way. It came like that. Finished off with a hair and face mask combo, and you have a really slick looking figure right out of the box.
Number 1.
And that leaves us with one sole minifigure left on the docket. Now, given the large number of minifigures I was judging for this list, this one might not be hyper obvious, so without further ado, drumroll please. Ba-dum, it's Samai. I mean, just look at him. This is the most unique and interesting LEGO minifigure to have ever featured in the Ninjago line. He was also a succinct and completed character within the show. His ending permanent, and so far, since unquestioned. I count him as a villain because although he spent the pilots acting as second fiddle to Garmadon, there is referenced history between them, and he spent an indeterminable amount of time ruling over the underworld before his untimely demise. He has the most fascinating design out of any character on this list, featuring a unique body mold that allows for 4 arms, and this cranium headpiece to be applied to the top, granting him the incredible and unique ability to move it and imply speech. I know I've said it a lot, but this is simply remarkable. It showcases how willing LEGO were at the time to invest in Ninjago as a concept, and although there is an unfortunate weakness in the plastic construction of the arms and, more tragically, the legs of those skeleton figures, Samai still rates an undeniable 10 out of 10 for me on all counts. And honestly, that's all there is to it. This is my current listing for the top 10 best LEGO Ninjago villain minifigures of the lot. This is, of course, heavily opinionated and might not reflect your own thoughts whatsoever, and honestly, might not even remain consistent with mine. If they try and pull what they did with Harumi and Crystallize with Morro, you might fall down quite a bit. And thus, make sure to leave your own top 10 favourites in the comment section below. And if you're in the mood for a less prestigious gathering, then check out this video here, where I go over the top 10 LEGO Ninjago Goon minifigures. Bye bye.